Welcome again to the S.E.M podcast. Zack, Hewlett, Jack, Bryce here hosting tonight, and we are joined by our good friend Brady Hess. Brady, how are you, man?
So good to be here.
Awesome. What part of the world are you calling from tonight?
So I'm in St. George, Utah.
St. George.
Yep.
Very cool. Well, from our previous conversation, sounds like you understand the format that we've got kind of put together here. So go ahead and start, pre-mission and the run up to getting your call, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, again, I thanks so much for putting this together, you two. It's been cool to see, to hear missionaries and kind of piece areas together. Missionaries that I've heard of, I've seen in area books and whatnot, but to kind of get their perspective and areas that they served in and people that they brought into the church that I had no idea who brought them into the church. So it's been cool. So
yeah.
So pre-mission. So I grew up in Fremont, California, which it's in the Bay Area, close to San Jose, Oakland area. And my brother served a mission. It was something that was always in the works for me. I've heard missionaries share their experiences of, that they have had times where they've had like this impression that they needed to serve a mission, or even youth that I've worked with recently who have kind of been on the fence. But I was never really that way. My brother set a good example, and it was just something that was always in the works for me. And got the call. I think I was in San Diego at the time when the call came. And so I headed back home, I believe, to open it, and nothing fancy. Had some cousins over that lived nearby, and opened it up. And Scotland, it was a shock. I think I had never known anybody who has ever been to Scotland, but I knew it as William Wallace in kilts, and that's really the extent of my
that's what it
knowledge
is.
of Scotland.
Yeah, that's it.
And so I remember my mom, she went to the library and got some books on Scotland, and so I'm reading, and it's like rolling hills and Highland games and kilts, and like nothing like what the mission was whatsoever. But it was cool to kind of figure out where Scotland was. I had no idea where it was at, really. But we were in Utah for maybe Thanksgiving or something right before I left, and you guys had Martha Miller on the podcast.
Yeah.
And she was living in my aunt's ward at the time, and she had just returned home from the mission, and I went to her house and chatted with her, and she kind of gave me the lowdown on Scotland. And I remember she just raved about President and Sister Vriens, just raved about him. And so I knew going into it that those two were just so loving and kind, and that was really comforting to me to know that I kind of knew a little bit about them and going into the mission. So that was a cool experience to sit down with her before I left. And so that was, let's see, I think I got my call in August of 2005 and left in December 7th is when I reported to the MTC.
Awesome.
Great time to go to the UK.
Yes. Yeah. I'll tell you where I was at once we get going. And yeah, it was quite the shock going from California to
not California.
Yep.
Oh man, I love it. All right, go to December 2007. What have you been up to since then? What's life from then to now look like?
Yeah. So after the mission, I came home. I think it was December 4th is when I got home, and went to school. Went to UVU, and I guess to jump back a little bit, I was into art, drawing, and so I thought, graphic design would be cool to do before the mission, and even on the mission. That I probably told a bunch of members that that's the path I was going to go. But and it was later on in my mission, as I was able to spend some time with President Vriens, that I gained a love for business, and like the entrepreneur in me kind of came out. And so anyway, I decided to go into business, and so I was studying business, and I played soccer for them. I played on the soccer team at UVU, and I played competitive soccer before the mission and club soccer, and our high school team was quite good. There were some guys that went and played professional soccer after high school, and so I enjoyed playing football in Scotland, and I could hold my own with
That
them.
was
So
one of my favorite memories of you. Is you'd introduce yourself and then you'd play football, and they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, this is not a normal American."
yeah,
Too funny.
it was fun. But yeah, so I was playing soccer. I worked at a treatment center for at-risk teenagers, and that was awesome. I was up in Provo, and just some crazy stories. That's for another podcast, I guess. Um, but really good life skills that I learned from the mission that I was able to apply there. And then I met my wife. She was teaching high school at Spanish Fork, and she was teaching history and government. And then she was coaching basketball with a friend, and that friend that she was coaching with, her husband was best friends with my brother. And I think I was the fifth wheel on their date, and she was like, "You know what? I'm gonna hook you up with my friend." And I was like, "Oh, whatever." And then we went on a triple date, super awkward, with my brother and his buddy, but date went well. And after that, I went home to my roommates, and I was like, "Guys, I just met my wife, and I'm gonna marry this girl." And it took her about 6 months to come around, but she eventually did. So, and no, it was great. She paid off some student debt, paid off my car. She was my sugar mama. So
Nice.
Well done.
I highly recommend that. Let's see. On the soccer team, there's a kid on the team from Japan. His name was Yuhei, just a stud, super good guy. And he was dating a girl who was a member of the church. He wasn't a member, and I knew that he was taking lessons, discussions from the missionaries, and we would have talks as we were traveling, and he'd come to me with just questions and whatnot, and I remember exactly where I was. I got a phone call from him. I was just leaving work, and he told me that he was going to get baptized, and he asked me to baptize him, and that was awesome. Super cool experience. I didn't really do much other than just try to live the gospel and chat with him about the gospel. But he ended up serving a mission in Australia, and I believe he's in Japan right now. But
That's cool.
Yeah, just an awesome resource for his country, I'm sure, right now. Let's see. And then my wife and I lived in Orem for a couple years, then moved to Lehigh and lived in a kind of a newer, younger community, townhome community. And so that was fun. And we had, I think, 2 kids at the time. And then I was working, doing sales up in Salt Lake, and quit soccer just because I needed to become an adult and provide for my family. So That was hard to do, but it was the right thing to do. And then was working, and then a buddy of mine, he came to me with an opportunity working with Vivint and on the wireless side, so the internet side, and he was managing a project that they were doing, and so he had me do it just part time on the side, and it was awesome. It was a cool gig, and so they were wanting to open up an office, two different offices, one in El Paso, Texas, and the other in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I talked to my wife, and it was like, El Paso or Albuquerque, and we're like, nope, we're good. Hard pass. And but eventually he talked us into it and sweetened the deal a little bit, and so we moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico. That was in 2015, and a month. So we had a 1-month-old baby that our third kid. We moved out there, didn't know a soul, and things were going really well for us in Lehigh, and we were pretty comfortable with where we were at. And a month to the day that we moved out there, my buddy called me up, and he's like, "Are you sitting down?" And I'm like, "Oh crap, that's never a good way to start a conversation." And he said they're closing down the offices and keeping things in Utah, but closing the offices. And I was like, after a month, like you had to have known that something was in the works. And he felt horrible, and I kind of played it cool on the call. I was like, "Oh man, like it's not your fault." And but after I hung up, I just broke down. It was devastating for me to move my family, and I couldn't go home and tell my wife, just break her heart. But she was awesome with it all, and we really wanted to move back to Utah, but we felt like we needed to be there, and it was, looking back, it was that job that took us to Albuquerque, New Mexico. We never would have went for anything else. But we needed to be there. So we were there for 5 years. Awesome learning experience. And we grew as a couple, grew as a family, not having to rely on our parents or other family members to get by. So that was good, really good experience. And just so many awesome people in the area that we were in. We almost built a house there. And then come the summer of 2020, we had 2 family reunions in St. George, Utah. And the second one, on the drive up, we're like planning, our house that we're wanting to build in Albuquerque. And then on the drive back, during the 4 days or so that we were there, we felt that we needed to move to St. George. So the drive back, we're like planning on listing our lot and looking at up houses in St. George. And then a few months later, we moved out, and we're loving it. It's been crazy. It's been a hectic ride. About 4 months after we moved here, I got called as bishop. So,
oh my gosh!
So yeah. You did need to move there.
Yeah, it was a pretty crazy 4 months. But yeah. Anyway, not to dive into that, we can jump back to the mission.
That probably worked out okay because everybody's coming back from being shut down for COVID and everything anyway, right? So you weren't the only new faces.
Yeah, well, it was kind of nice because nobody really knew me, and I didn't know anybody. So it worked in my favor. I had a clean slate. I could be whoever I wanted to be, But they picked up quickly on my antics.
So who was the person that you met first that said, "Hey, he could be the bishop of that ward"?
So the bishop that was serving at the time, he got called into the stake presidency. He'd been in for 5 years, and the first Sunday that I was there, I was asked to say the opening prayer, and the bishop was out of town. He was watching via Zoom, and after the prayer, he texted his executive secretary, and he said, "Who was that said the prayer?" And I'm really good friends with him now, but he told me that he had an impression that I was going to replace him as bishop at that moment, which
Wow.
crazy. So
Yeah.
and it wasn't even a good prayer, like not my best. So
You didn't even try to say, "Oh, it was a bad internet connection. It wasn't me."
yeah. And we were all still wearing masks at the time, and just
Oh
a
my gosh.
weird situation. But yeah, it's been good. We'll leave it at that. So
That's amazing. So you have how many kids now?
we have 4. So our oldest, we have one girl. She's our oldest, Riley. She's 11. And then Austin is 9, Dallin is 7, and Caden is 4.
Nice. Sounds like a good group.
Fun ages for sure.
That's great.
I love it.
Yeah.
All right, Brady. So take us back. You can start MTC and kind of go from there.
Yeah, for sure. So I made some notes. I'm gonna pull these up real quick. The MTC was awesome. We had, I haven't gone back to look at how many we had, but I think we had 15 missionaries that went out in our group, which I've heard from others that they've had about that went out. We had one Sister Bautista, that came out with us, and let's see. The MTC was awesome. So just to kind of start, I've gone back through my journal the past couple months or so since you guys started this, and I've never read my journal that like from start to finish. I never have. I've gone back and read different entries, but it was amazing to see, like, at least once a week, I would say this was the hardest day of my life, or this was the longest day of my life, or this is the happiest day of my life. And to see the progression, like as it got harder, but like at the same time, I was more stressed out. And it was interesting to see how I kept repeating and saying like, oh, I had the longest day. I've never been so tired in my life, or I've never been so happy in my life. And so I'm glad I was able to go back and observe that progression in the mission. But going back to the MTC, and also if I have any friends that are watching that don't know the lingo, the MTC is the Missionary Training Center. It's where we go before going out on our missions to learn what the heck we're supposed to share and talk about, and to kind of polish up and make sure that we know what we're doing. So our group, we were told that we were the first group to go from, it was like 19 days down to 15 days. And they said that it was because they raised the MTC cost, was a reason that we were told. And my roommates were Elder Oliver, Elder Gregerson, and Elder Kilgore. And Elder Kilgore was he was my MTC companion. He was awesome. He was from San Diego, I think, and he'd only been a member for just a short period of time. And I remember President Winwood. He sent a memo to all of us, a letter to all of us, and told us that we were the loudest, most disrespectful group he has ever had in the MTC. So I mean, take that for what it's worth. But we had fun, and I don't know if we were disrespectful, but they never let us out to go exercise, or so we had to let off our 19-year-old energy somehow.
He probably had that letter that he sent out every single transfer.
Totally, for sure. Yep.
I don't remember getting it.
Absolutely.
Maybe my companions did or something.
Yeah, I went through my journal and I read that. I thought it was funny. But then on the flip side of that, we had a neat experience. It was probably one of the last days. We watched, I think, like Ensign of the Nation and then Lamb of God. And after Lamb of God, President Winwood, he asked Elder Gregerson to get up and bear his testimony. And Elder Gregerson bore super strong testimony. And President Winwood said that the spirit had never been that strong after watching the Lamb of God, and as we kind of bore testimony of it. So we got our act together there towards the end of the MTC. Um, and Elder Christofferson came. I think he was in the presidency of the 70 at the time, and he came with his wife and son. And I remember his son was like just the man. He just got off his mission, and I remember thinking of in Harry Potter, was his name Cedric Diggory? Just the man, just like the perfect child, and just like everything about him was like just perfect. Anyway, but it was cool to see Elder Christofferson and his wife shook all of our hands. They all shook our hands when we walked in, and then they turned the lights off and put a black light on, and we all had this green stuff all over our hands. And she put some substance on our hand just to show that how dirty our hands get as we shake people's hands. And she's like, "You just shook my hand, and look how much stuff is all over your hand." And so I remember that image of all that stuff.
Little hygiene lesson.
Yeah, I'm surprised Sister Vriens didn't take that one to heart.
If she'd been in the meeting, she might have.
Yeah. And then we took off, and then again, like the whole Harry Potter theme. Like we're on a train going to the mission home or going to like Hogwarts, and I remember there's this woman with a trolley going up and down the train, the train, and I somehow got like money, and I had some pound coins and like the pence and whatever. I can't remember, 10 pound or 10 pence. I had no idea what was what, and I went to go buy some snacks, and I just hold my hand out with these coins, and I'm like, "Can you help me out here? I have no idea." And she could have ripped me off super bad, but and then we go to the mission home, like Hogwarts, and we get sorted. Companion, and the companion comes up, and like everybody's cheering for us, and we get into a zone, and it was just like magical. It was so cool. Everything's so new and so green, and on the opposite side of the road, and it was just such a cool experience. And then so I got my trainer was Richard McConkey, and such a good dude. And I think maybe before we got sorted into companionships, I think someone mentioned that he was the grandson of Bruce R. McConkey, and so just right then, everyone was like, "Oh, like I hope I get McConkey. I hope I get McConkey." And so, but I got him. I lucked out. And so we got assigned to Bridge of Dawn, and
Nice.
I don't think that area had a car, but we got a brand new Corsa maybe, and we whitewashed the area. I don't know who was in there before us, but we're driving up to Bridge of Dawn, and granted, it's like 23rd, I think, because I think we got to the mission home on the 22nd of December. So it's December 23rd. We're driving up. It's super dark, and maybe even raining, and we're driving, and I see this car in the distance with the headlights on, and I'm like, that car's in the same lane as we are. I'm thinking, okay, and it's getting closer, and I'm like, yep, that car is definitely in the same lane as us. And it gets super close. So I'm like, Elder McConkey, are we supposed to be in the left side? And he's, "Oh yeah, yeah." And he swerves over super fast.
No. Oh my God.
So I did any driving in the mission before that, but or he was zoning out, or I don't know, something. But after that, he was great. He for the most part, he figured it out.
Was this like in
I,
Edinburgh as you guys were driving towards the Fourth Road Bridge or whatever? Or?
I can't remember. Yeah, middle of nowhere. The car was super far out, and it felt like forever. But yeah, I remember that from the drive. So we get to Bridge of Dawn. Probably my second day in. We're driving. He's driving, and the phone rings, and I'm like, he can't get it, so I have to answer the phone. And this woman is just talking Scottish, and I am trying to understand just one word out of every 10. And I hang up, and McConkey's like, "What'd she want?" I was like, I don't even know who it was. Like, I have no idea what she wanted. And so he calls her back, and it was a member who invited us for dinner. And I was like, I'm sorry. I could not, like, they did not teach us that in the MTC.
Oh my gosh.
And it must have been just a week or two into the area. And one night McConkey's like, Elder Hess, do you know how many times you spit today? And I'm like, no, how many times did I spit? He's like, 88 times. You spit 88 times today when we were out walking, and I played baseball that summer for like a traveling team, and so it was still in me to just spit all over the place. And so that I know that probably bugged him quite a bit, but
Apparently.
yeah. and you haven't had him on, so he can rebuttal all this stuff. But
He's coming on in a few weeks.
Yeah. Oh, he is coming on in a few weeks?
Yes, he is.
Oh, good, good.
We'll bring it up and see what he says.
Okay, sounds good. But I'm sure for every one thing that he did that bugged me, there's probably 5 things that I did that bugged him. So, being a brand new, probably arrogant missionary. But McConkey was great. He was just what I needed. He was super intellectual, super smart, and we had Midgley and Bass in our group. And Jack, when did you leave the mission?
I was in Bass's group, so we left the beginning of February.
Okay.
Just one transfer after you got there, I guess.
Yeah. I remember Bass and Osmond sang at our zone conference right before they took off, and it was awesome. And then Lineker, he was our district leader, and then Lineker and Midgley were the zone leaders. And I'm not sure if there's ever been a more fun zone leader companionship than those two. We had so much fun on P Day, even non-P days. Those two were awesome. I don't think anybody has mentioned Moroni's challenge. Have either of you heard of that?
I'm trying to remember if is it the noodle thing, right? Am I remembering it correctly?
So I think Midgley used bread. He soaked a piece of bread.
Oh,
we lay down and lift up our shirt.
Chief Captain Moroni. Yeah.
Chief Captain Moroni.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if it was some kind of initiation, but he did it on me. You put this soggy piece of bread on your stomach, and you light a match and then put a cup on top of it, and then it suctions the bread in your stomach. Just the weirdest feeling. And I don't know how it got that name, but
because so a young men's leader told me about it before my mission, but in order to take the cup off, you're supposed to find Chief Captain Moroni in the Book of Mormon, which is not in the Book of Mormon.
Oh, that's funny. I don't remember that part of it, but
I don't either, but you've brought quite a memory back to my. I can see like the pictures of this happening. I don't think we did it together, Jack. It was with somebody else.
I never did it. I just heard about it.
Yeah, somebody had me do it. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, but we yeah,
revolutionary.
You guys are in Peterhead, so we had Elder Littlefield and Elder Borders.
Oh, yeah.
So it was a pretty big companionship, pretty large companionship. So there's something about Peterhead and large men to be sent up there. But I remember for some reason I feel like they were always in our area. But so I'd go on exchanges with them and Elder Littlefield. I just remember he would put down food like no other. And he would, like, I told him, I was like Brent, right? Like a little bit, like I stop, like I know my limits. And he was like, how can you stop until you just feel sick inside? Like he was just like, it didn't make sense to him to stop eating until you just felt sick. But he was fun.
I have a quick story that I'll probably share when I talk to him, but when we served together, there was a single sister that had 3 daughters that was worried when we came over for dinner if she'd have enough food to feed the both of us. She like, openly told someone that in the ward, and so we had to go over very like cautiously. It was something else.
That's funny. I'm
glad it wasn't my problem though.
No, I believe it. But no, he was cool. But
yeah, Brent was a great eater.
Yeah. But Midgley and Lineker, those two, and McConkey, I mean, I was with him a lot, but those 3, they really set the tone for me, how to have fun as a missionary, but then how to be serious and how to work. Elder Barber as well. He was our district leader, and him and Zinkowski didn't get along the best. And Barber, he talked about that. And I remember one day, President Vriens called me up and he's like, "Elder, pack up your bags." And it was like mid transfer. I was like, "What the heck?" He's like, "Your new companion is Elder Barber." And I was like, "Okay." And then later that night, I think Midgley called me. He's like, "Hey, like, just stay put. Zinkowski doesn't want to move." And so like, okay, whatever. That's cool. But we went on exchanges a lot. Me and McConkey with Barber and Zinkowski. So I spent a lot of time with Zinkowski and Barber and loved both of them. They were a lot of fun. Let's see. And then as far as members, the Adams, Chris Adam,
man, great family, funnest, great family.
So I think we spent Christmas with them and the Williamsons, and they had, so their daughter Christine, and then like Rowan and Daniel, and I had a few boys, and they had a Rhodesian Ridgeback, and they like hunt lions in Africa or something crazy, and that dog was insane. But just the funnest household. And Chris, he reminded me of a buddy, a guy who was my parents' age back home, Pat McCoy. Just the funnest, just still like a kid, a little edgy at times, but that you kind of loved him for it, you know.
Yeah.
But that was a fun house. And then the Williamsons, they had Owen and DJ, and then Danny. He got off his mission when I was there, I believe, and they were fun. And then the Gilmores, they were awesome. Such a good family. Matthew, we play soccer a lot with Matthew. He was really good. And I remember going over there, I think for the first time, and I took like 2 years of piano lessons and couldn't remember anything except for 2 songs. I think one was Canon in D. And I go to the Gilmore's house and I'm like, "All right, look at this, guys." And I play like a lame version of Canon in D. And they're all like incredibly gifted musicians and singers. And then like, I think for the next 15 or 20 minutes, they were all like going to town on my piano and singing. And I just put me in my place with my lame Canon in D attempt to impress the family. But we had an Easter egg hunt there that was pretty memorable. It was a lot of fun. Let's see. The Stevens, I think one of them was English. With the wife, they were an awesome family. The Cattells, I think Brother Cattell was the ward mission leader at the time. And then Brother King, he's been mentioned, the kilt shop owner.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. He had a super nice Jaguar that he'd take us to church and every now and then. And it was like either take public transportation or have Brother King take us in his super expensive car. So that was nice. And then, so we had a recent convert in the ward. His name is Greg Sinclair, and super intellectual guy. he'd been baptized, I don't know, maybe 2 months before we got there. And I remember him and McConkey would have these discussions, like talking about theology, just like deep stuff. And it was like my nap time. These two would just have at it, and I was lost. It was like super warm in his flat, and I would just doze off. I had nothing to add to the conversation. But he, after a couple months, I remember noticing a change in him where, because he'd come with us to joint teaches, and then he'd kind of dog us with appointments and not be super solid. And then one day we went over, and he'd been drinking and smoking with his flatmate and just denouncing everything. And I remember we McConkey talked him kind of down and settled him down. And then in the weeks to come, he was reminded of the feelings that he had, and the truths that he knew, and got him back on track. And I remember a couple months after that, I was still in the area, and his parents saw the change in him and saw how important the church was to him. And so I think it was for his 21st birthday, they bought him a plane ticket to Salt Lake City so he could go see conference.
That's cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was cool. But yeah, Greg, and I haven't kept in touch with him, but I hope he's doing well. But he's a stud. And then so McConkey left. I don't know where he went. And then Elder Ford came in, Jason Ford, and we hit it off immediately. Midgley trained Elder Ford, I believe, and kind of prepped me on what to expect with Ford. But yeah, just like instantly we were best friends, and still to this day we keep in touch, keep tabs on one another. And we had a challenge the 6 weeks we were together to read the Book of Mormon from start to finish, and we did, which I think was good, really good for the both of us. And then these two sisters have been mentioned, Sister Mead and Sister Hutton. And Zack, I think you knew Sister Hutton. She was the hoarder in Aberdeen.
Oh my gosh. Yes, indeed. I've been there, done that.
Yeah. But just, she was awesome. Her and Sister Mead. Sister Mead was like an energizer bunny. And those two were just so faithful and had us over all the time, and fun to be around. And I went on a cruise over the summer, and I don't know how I got talking to this guy, but I think I saw something on his shirt, and I was like, "Are you from Scotland?" And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "What part?" He's like, "Oh, it's up north." And I was like, "Where?" He's like, "It's an island." I was like, "Which island?" He said, "Shetland." I was like, "I know exactly where Shetland is." And it was so cool to chat with him and just to hear the accent again. And I was probably like a little kid in a candy shop. He was probably like, "Who are you?" And but just a super, super cool guy. And then there was another couple on the cruise from, I think, Dunfermline. He was in the military, and they had a couple kids that were awesome that we got to know a little bit. But just when you meet people from Scotland, you just want to strike up a conversation just to hear the accent again.
Oh yeah. My favorite place to have that happen is in Florida when it's still summer holiday over there. Like early September is when, I swear, we were there just this last September, and I heard so many Scottish accents, like anything from Glasgow to Edinburgh to Dundee to Aberdeen, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't just pick one person to talk to because there were so many. But I talked to a couple people, and I ran into some people that were from Kirkcaldy, and I said, "Yeah, I lived in Dunfermline for 6 months." They're like, serious? Like, and
Mm,
instantly best friends. Like, it's the best thing in the world.
yeah, yeah, yep. And I doubt they meet Americans very often who go and live in Scotland. And
Right.
so they're immediately, it kind of piques their interest as well. Really, really cool. But it was a special first area for me, and it was really hard. And I remember in my journal, I told my parents when I got the transfer to move, I said it was probably good because any longer in that area, it would have been extremely difficult to leave, and it was hard to leave. But just really really fond memories there. And so
Hang on, before you move on, Dan Nate told us a story about how you pretended to be extra cozy with Jason Ford. Tell us your side of the story.
oh yes, I reached out to Nay after that to just touch base. I think I saw him at UVU. I think I ran into him. Yeah, everything checked out from from what
True
he
story.
said. Absolutely, I think money on it that it was barbers.
I'm not surprised by that.
to do that. Yeah, but it was awesome. It was a good way to get him introduced to Ford and I. That was fun. Yeah, I remember Ford and I. We were just super giddy, like rearranging stuff. And I think when he was there, we couldn't help but to smile and to kind of giggle. And so he had to have known, but he bore his heart out to us. It was like I kind of felt bad for doing it, and I'm sure like future like the next few teaches that he had, he in the back of his mind, he's like, I probably shouldn't get so invested in this person because it could be another prank.
You took his best stuff, man. Oh,
Yeah.
it's too funny.
Yeah, but no, yeah, that was good. Oh, and we must have had a zone conference or something because we had Peter had come down, we had Shetland come down. I think it was Jansen and other Archambault. I think they came down, and we were all together. And who else was there? Yeah, so McCabe and Bachholt, and it was probably Ford's idea, but we like taped our legs in stripes and then shaved in between the tape and then removed the tape, and we just had these like lines around our legs. It was so dumb. I probably shouldn't have said that, but all right, moving on.
Oh my gosh. This is why President Vriens said that the sleepovers were forbidden. Because we always did stupid stuff. Oh, it's too funny.
Absolutely. But yeah, so moves came. I got called to Springboig in Glasgow. And I remember, I think McCabe touched on it, but I got that call and it was like you heard of Glasgow, and I think with McCabe and I, it was like, well, nice knowing you. We'll maybe see you again, hopefully, if I make it out alive. And my companion was Dexter Snyder, and he had been out for 6 weeks, and I think I was 4.5. And I think Elder Bear was there before him, and they baptized the family, who eventually fell away not too long after, which was super unfortunate. But yeah, Snyder, he was tall for me, probably not tall for you guys. 6'4". He was pretty tall. But great heart, hard worker, just like good to his core. And I remember Springboard, we were told, was the smallest proselyting area in the mission. And we met in a community center because the church was apparently burned down by Neds a few years beforehand. But yeah, so Neds. So for those that don't know what a Ned is, a non-educated delinquent, right?
Yep.
Is what they are. So just kids with parents who are kind of low lives and let their kids run around and just kind of terrorize the town. But in Springborg, I remember we this group, and they had a soccer ball, and I was just juggling a soccer ball in my suit, and I think it impressed them enough to just like be like, 1, you're an American, 2, you're this like missionary. How are you able to do what you're doing? And I think instantly they were like instant friendship with these Neds, and they were like, we got your back. Like any other group of Neds that give you crap, let us know. Like we'll take them out for you. It's like, all right, that's cool. I'll take it. But I think during that first transfers, we had the tri-mission tour where we went to Preston to hear from then Elder Nelson. Zack, you went to that, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
And I remember that Elder Nelson, President Nelson, was President Vriens' stake president, if I recall correctly. And so I'm sure it was cool for President Vriens to see Elder Nelson and both of their capacities, and maybe they probably didn't have time to reminisce, but just to see each other would have been cool.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then I saw Elder Midgley again. We reconnected. I think he was probably on his last transfer, but he was there, and he gave me something that was really cool and really meaningful to me. It was a Sean Connery poster, which might sound a little silly, but it had some meaning behind it. He told me to give it to my favorite missionary in the mission before I left. And I can't remember who gave it to him before he left. But on the back of the poster, it had all the missionaries' names on there who had received it and the reason why they had received it.
Wow.
And it also said that the poster must stay in the mission until the work is done. So I'm curious if that poster is still floating around. I'm sure during Hammer time it got burnt to shreds. But
took the words cool. right out of my mouth.
Yeah, but if I remember later, I'll tell you who I gave that poster to. We'll add some suspense to this episode. So back to Glasgow. So Snyder and we were walking down the Alexandra Parade, I think it was, and some guy with his girlfriend shouts out, he's like, "Are you Jehovah's Witnesses?" And I remember Snyder just kind of looked back frustrated, and he was like, "No." And then it couldn't have been more than 5 minutes later. We're walking back, and then this guy, he'd been drinking. He wasn't a Ned per se. He was probably mid-20s, so he's a little older. He's walking towards us, and you could hear his girlfriend say, "Don't try and act tough," and trying to like hold him back. And then he walks up and basically clotheslines Snyder in the face, who, by the way, was like 4 inches taller than me. So I don't know why he went after him. So I tell Snyder to keep walking, and told this guy that we don't want any trouble, and as we're walking away, he's coming at us again, and I look back and he's reaching for something, and I'm just like, "Snyder, run, like go, 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 go." And so we're booking it. And I mean, luckily this guy, he was intoxicated and there's no way he was going to catch up, and we probably could have handled him, but a few days later he would have had 5 friends and he would have been sober, and it wouldn't have been good. But and it's been mentioned too, in that same area, not too long after, Elder Black and Harrison got jumped and spent some time at the hospital. And so I was only there for 3 months. I thought it was 6 weeks, but then going through my my journal, and Hewlett, I have some stories that I came across in my journal with you.
Oh man, here it comes.
let's see. Okay, yeah, I'll hit these up. So, let me see. Where are those notes? Okay, Hewlett. So we went on exchanges. You were in Hamilton,
Okay.
and first off, there was a guy in our area, somewhat recent convert, Gary Salmon, and
Oh, yeah.
you found out that your uncle baptized him.
Oh my
Right?
gosh, I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, I read that in my journal. So, how you guys figure that out? But your uncle baptized his family, baptized Gary Salmon's family.
That's right. I do remember that. Holy cow.
Did he serve in Scotland? Your uncle?
Yeah, so it's actually not my direct uncle, but he's my mother's cousin's husband. But I knew him well
Okay.
enough as a family member that when I went to Scotland, he was super excited for me. And interestingly enough, this man who is my uncle, his dad and mom had served a couples mission in Scotland too. So like
Oh wow.
Scotland is, I mean, their last name is McIntosh, so it's kind of suits them well. But I remember that exact interaction now that you bring it up. That's amazing.
Yeah. So I'm glad I wrote that one down. And then another one. So we were on exchanges, and it was I don't know, maybe June of 2006, if that sounds right.
Yeah.
It must have been warm because you were sweating a little bit. And I remember that you were sweating so much that it went through your shirt and soaked your tie.
Not surprised at all.
And for the record, I was sweaty too, but not quite that sweaty.
Well, okay, let's be frank here, okay? I spent most of my mission on the East Coast and north. Hamilton and Glasgow was the furthest south that I got my whole mission. And
Sure.
I hadn't
Yep.
experienced a summer like that. It was hot. So
Yeah, it
we
was
had
super hot.
some warm days, and mind you, I spent what 20 21 months of my mission in a car. So I walking was not an Elder Hewlett thing.
I have very few pictures of me in a short sleeve shirt, and that was, I think, that month or two was the few times that I wore a short sleeve shirt.
Yes, indeed.
And then one more. Well, to kind of preface it, so it was a P day, and Snyder and we were going into town, and we jump on a bus, and um, and a number of things happened before, and there was a reason why we jumped on that specific bus, and we jump on the bus, and the first person I see on the bus sitting in the front seat was my high school soccer coach, Johnny Kinnear. And
Wow.
his dad, I think, played and coached soccer in Scotland, and his brother is Dominic Kinnear is a big. He's coached. I can't think of the teams now. A couple different MLS teams. Anyway, he was there for the World Cup, kind of touring Europe.
Wow.
Houston Dynamo. He was the coach of the Houston Dynamo. But anyway, like, we make eye contact, and he's like, "Brady?" And I'm like, "Johnny? Like, what?" Like, we were both like, "What are you doing here? What are you doing here?" Because we were in our P Day clothes, and I had my name tag on, and he was like, "Are you on a mission?" Because in high school on my team, I was called the Storm and Mormon, and so he knew I was a member of the church, and but it was such a tender mercy to be able to just have a little piece of home, and to just chat with him, and just see a familiar face and chat. It was like 15 minutes. It wasn't enough time, but it was just so cool to have that experience. But we were on our way to meet up with you guys. I can't remember who your companion was at the time. I know Hardy was there because I wrote about him.
It was hard. I was in the tri-panionship with Hardy and Powell for the last couple of weeks of that transfer because Elder Hardy was serving with Elder Aurelio at the time, and he had to go home earlier because his visa was expiring.
Okay. So we're at a restaurant. I'm guessing it was probably Jimmy Chung's. I don't know if there's one there in Glasgow, but and they wouldn't give us free water. And so you asked for a cup, and you went into the bathroom to get a drink out of the faucet, and then you came back, and we would rotate going in and out of the bathroom with this cup. and Elder Hardy got caught. Like they caught onto it, and they take the cup from Hardy and spoil our fun. And so, but but
Ingenious.
I don't remember getting kicked out. Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, we were desperate just for faucet water. But
oh man, that's too funny.
Yeah, and then a couple more from Springboig. And I had forgot about this one until I went through the journal. But so Snyder and I, we were walking, and we heard these two girls behind us talking about Jesus. We were like, "What the heck? That's odd." And then they caught up to us and were talking to us for a bit, and then they asked for hugs as we were done talking, and we were like, "We're not allowed to give out hugs." And so the girl next to me comes in for a kiss, and I move almost just in time, and so she like kisses me, like just barely misses, and then the one next to Snyder couldn't reach his face, so she goes and kisses his badge. So we got a little action on the mission. Well, Snyder's badge got some action on the mission. That was,
oh my gosh.
I completely forgot about that.
Oh, that's too funny.
And then so we had Rasmussen and Christensen come. They were traveling, and we were probably one of the youngest companionships. And I remember that they were traveling to young companionships, and I think we were at. Do you guys know Sister M, Mary McCulloch? I think it was. She went by Sister M.
I don't remember her.
I think we were at her house, and she loves missionaries. And I remember we were there. I don't think Rasmussen mentioned this, but we went into her house, and a missionary had sent like a wedding invite or whatever to Sister M, and it was a former missionary, and it was with a girl who Rasmussen used to date. And the shock on his face.
Gosh.
I don't know if he was like, she was still a prospect or whatnot, but just I remember the look on his face. It was like shock and like despair, and it was funny. But Sister M, she wrote my parents letters, and she met up with me later in another area, and she was the best. She was gold. And we were chapping, and I was gonna go get that book. We chapped into a guy, and he was telling us about this book that he wrote, and he goes and gets it, and Snyder's like, I have that book. And it was the Glasgow Bible. Did you guys ever hear about the Glasgow Bible?
I think I'd heard about that, actually.
The Bible written in Scottish slang. It was the coolest thing. I need to bust it out and read it again. But he brought it out, and he was like stoked to hear that Snyder had a copy of it. And I think his name was like Jamie Stewart or something like that. But he sat down and was just reading it to us, and it was the coolest
That's
thing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
His name was Jamie, the King Jamie version.
Yeah. But it was awesome. I think he included just some of the main stories, but David and Goliath was the best. I'll have to send you a screenshot of it.
That's awesome.
And we were walking. I remember we were walking right by a bus stop, and I see Jack Black on like this bus stop, like a promotion of Jack Black and for Nacho Libre. And I had heard about Nacho Libre because my cousin directed the movie, and I had heard about the filming of it in like Mexico, and because he did Napoleon Dynamite, which was like a massive success, and And I had heard about Nacho Libre, and I wasn't quite sure like what it was about. And then I see this like billboard on a bus stop, and I see Jared Hess, and I'm like, Snyder, like that's my cousin. Like he did that movie, and I'm like anybody, like I'm related to this guy. And then as the months went on, missionaries would come into the mission and just quote Nacho Libre left and right. And I was so frustrated. And I think that Christmas, President Fredrick let me watch it. But
that's how Napoleon Dynamite was for me. When Zack's group came in, they were all quoting it, and I was like, "What is this?" It's totally weird.
Yeah, same with Nacho Libre. Just different humor, but it was hilarious. And then the last thing with Glasgow, it was President Vriens' last transfer before he went home, and I remember the last interview that he gave me. He said it was his departing interview that he essentially gave missionaries before they left, and he told me something that was extremely impactful for me. He said that I don't know, I'm getting emotional for this. He said if I didn't become an assistant to the president, I wouldn't be living up to my potential, and that can go a couple different ways, right? As a 19-year-old arrogant kid, it can kind of get in your head a little bit, but it instilled in me a confidence that I didn't have, a confidence that I needed to kind of step up and elevate my ability to be an example and kind of cut the immaturity out of the mission. And President Vriens had a way of leaving you better than how he found you, whether it was in interviews or zone conferences. He had a way of boosting your confidence when you were in his presence. I'm sure both of you have felt that same way.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so that was kind of a turning point for me. And then I got transferred to Dundee, and I trained Elder Brandon Buckley. I was sent to the Liff ward in Dundee, where I spent the next 10.5 months of my mission, which was so awesome. But Buckley, he was so willing, such a great attitude about the work, and really loved my time serving with him. And I'd love for you to get him on to maybe share how awful of a trainer maybe I was. And I don't know, but we were together, I think, for 3 months. And we had Elder Peacock as our district leader. I think Peacock he's a fan favorite. He's such a good guy. So that was fun. I think he was with Elder Luke's at the time, but that was a fun district. But in that area, we had Eileen Turnbull and Nessie, I can't remember her last name. And I didn't know that. So Doug Poland, he talked about these two. Apparently he brought them into the mission, or he brought them into the church. And these two ladies were gold. They would buy groceries for us every week. We went there, I can't remember what day of the week, but we would go to Eileen's house, and she would have groceries for both of us. And every other week, they would give us each 10 pounds. And they would not let us refuse that as much as we tried. And you could picture these two ladies taking a bus to the grocery store and public transportation, getting groceries and bringing them back every week for missionaries for a long time. And so I benefited greatly from from those two. And Eileen had a granddaughter, Adela, who and I think this is kind of when member missionary work started to transition a little bit. And and we spent some time with Eileen in her house to teach her, and if we would have been out knocking doors a ton, we might have missed this opportunity to get to know her granddaughter. But Adela, she was not interested really in our conversation. But as time went on, we first built a relationship with her, and then eventually she began to take the missionary discussions, and we eventually were able to baptize her, and her sister as well, Tanya. I don't know if she ended up getting baptized. And then Adela's other sister, I remember she came, not interested whatsoever, kind of against, I think. And then I think she asked one question one week, and that question led to a 45-minute first discussion. And so, so Eileen and Nessie they were just rock stars. And Eileen helped bring Adela into the church. And I think Eileen passed away a few years ago. But just great examples of member missionary work. And then one person that probably holds the biggest place in my heart in Scotland is Sheila Keogh. Did you guys have a chance to know the Keoghs?
Yes, indeed. You were probably there after Ben went on his mission, right?
Yeah, so he left on his mission. I don't know how long into when I was there, maybe just a few months, 3-4 months. But he came to joint teaches with us, and he was ready to
oh my
be a
gosh,
missionary.
So ready, unbelievable young man, and their family was so much fun.
Yeah, I mean, there were probably times where we were on joint teaches and questions would be asked, and Buckley and I were like, Ben, you want to take this one for us? But
that's so good.
He was awesome. I remember he was on his mission just first out, and it must have been, I don't know, Mother's Day or Christmas or something. And he phoned home, and I walk in the door, and Sheila's talking to him, and she's like, Elder Hess, someone wants to talk to you. And so I got to chat with him for a few minutes on his mission, and
it's pretty cool.
Just such a good dude. And yeah, he's I've met up with him in Utah. It's been a number of years, but he's been out here, and I've met up with him and his wife and kids. But Sheila, she was my missionary mom. She calls me her boy. And I remember, so they have 10 kids. They had 9 kids when I was there. They had 1 kid after I left. And so their house was just the best. There was always stuff going on. But I remember one dinner appointment, we were there, and I had a rough day. I think we had a investigator who postponed her baptism. It was just a rough day. And I probably wasn't hiding my emotions very well. I thought I was, but I think I was off, like in the kitchen or something. And she came up and she just said, are you okay? Like, are you doing okay? And she probably doesn't remember this, but I was just like, oh yeah, I'm great. Good. I'm fine. And, but just her coming over and checking on me, it meant the world to me. Just to know that she cared and was there for me, and kind of had my back. And that's just who she was, just such a Christ-like person. And we FaceTime their family every now and then. It's been a while since I have, but and then Matthew, he came out with us a little bit on joint teaches, and he was fun. We kind of have like a brotherly relationship, like a love-hate, more like give and take kind of thing, which that's just kind of who he is. But he's such a stud, good guy. Let's see. And then Buckley left after a few months, and then Borders came in, Lyle Borders. And I got to know him in Aberdeen when he was in Peterhead. He was a great chef. I think his dad was a chef, and he knew his way around the kitchen. And so not only was my food bought for me by Eileen and Nessie, but it was also cooked for me by Borders. So it was a pretty good setup there for me in Dundee for for 6 months. I was with Borders for 6 months.
Wow.
I think after 4.5 months, we talked to President Fredrick and told him to keep us where we were if that was the Lord's will, and that was the case. We were able to stay together for a while. I can't remember how far into it, but we had a zone basketball conference or basketball tournament, and between the 3 districts, I believe, and like one of the first plays, Borders falls down, hurts his wrist super bad. We ended up keep playing, but that night, after our visits and whatnot, he's just like, there's something wrong. My wrist hurts. So we went to A&E pretty late. Turns out he broke a bone in his wrist, had to get it casted the next day. And so we had to call a member at like 11:45 to come pick us up. Mark Veal. Either of you know the Veals, Mark Veal?
I remember the name. I don't remember his face though.
Yeah, it's a shame. He's such a good dude. But yeah, so Borders was in a cast for a large part of our time together. And then I wrote a letter to Arnold Schwarzenegger on my mission. I'm not sure how many people can say that, but he was the governor of California at the time, and I was asking him to obtain reciprocity for California driver's licenses in the UK. So some states had it at the time where it allowed U.S. citizens from that state to obtain a UK license with no testing and just a small fee. But he vetoed that, unfortunately. So that was not to be for me.
Good try.
You tried. That's impressive.
I know.
I wouldn't
I still
even know
have
what to do.
I still have the letter, which is cool. My mom saved it. I don't know how she got a hold of it, but yeah, that was cool. And then while we were there, Elder Oaks came to the mission to Glasgow, I believe. So we traveled to Glasgow. We drove with Colin Thompson. He was a recent convert. And then Pauline Campbell. And she was awesome. She ended up going on a mission to Temple Square. So she was super missionary minded. And but I remember Elder Oaks, he walks in and he just speed walks up to the stand. And at the time, I don't know what, he was probably like 80. And he shook all of our hands before the meeting. And he said he hadn't prepared anything and that he wanted to look into our eyes to know what to speak on. And so after he said that, we're all like, oh crap, you know. But that was really neat. The spirit was super strong. And afterwards, McCabe and Joe McLean and I were just chatting out in the foyer, and Elder Oaks comes up to us and puts his arm around me, and he's chatting with us for 5 minutes, just kind of shooting the breeze about missionary work. And that was a really neat experience to have. And another thing, you guys had Zack on the podcast. So I remember we were in the foyer either before or after, and he's like, I'm going to ask Elder Oaks if he's seen Christ. I'm going to do it, guys. I'm going to ask him. And we're just like, I don't know if I do that, Elder Clark. He's like, I don't care. I'm doing it. And then sure enough, afterwards, he walks up to Elder Oaks and he's like, have you seen Christ? And we're all just like, oh, crud, you know, like, oh, great, here we go. And Elder Oaks, you could tell that it wasn't the first time he'd been asked. And he responded with a scripture, and I cannot remember the scripture that he shared, but it basically alluded to the fact that he had, and in a kind of roundabout way. But I think we were all kind of glad that Elder Clark asked, but embarrassed.
The question everybody wants to ask, but nobody does, right?
Yeah, that's kind of a big
Except
question.
Zack.
Leave it to
That's right.
Elder Clark to do that. Oh, and I reached out to him after his podcast, and he told me that he's coming to St. George for I think December 3rd for a show, and I bought tickets. So I'm going to go see him play
That's awesome.
here in just a few weeks. Yeah, I'm stoked. It'll be good to see him again. Let's see. I'm going to look at some notes here. My time in Dundee, man, I could spend forever on that. So another person that has a special place in my heart is Michelle Burnage. We entered the area with not a whole lot of prospects, and she was I don't know when she was baptized, but we went and met with her, and even in the area book, it mentioned that she had problems with drinking and smoking, and we met with her, and we knew right away that there was just so much potential with her, and we got along really well with her, and she had a daughter at the time, and Michelle was awesome, and her daughter was Michelle, Michelle Jr., little Michelle, but big Michelle, she was awesome, and to be in the area for so long and to see the progress that she made, it went from just the situation that she was in to just light. She emulated just so much light. And I remember I mentioned Pauline Campbell, who went on a mission. She was super instrumental with Michelle. And I remember I can't remember what street it was in Dundee, but Michelle and Pauline dressed up like sister missionaries, with name tags, like big, huge paper name tags, and preach my gospels, and they're out just GQ on the streets. And so she came such a long way, and we ended up baptizing her daughter, who was 9 at the time, and I think that was the first person that I baptized, which was really special for me. But Michelle, I remember, I think it was Buckley and I, we made a deal with her that we would quit eating chocolate if she would quit smoking. And we were pretty much deprived of everything else. So chocolate was the only thing that we could think of to quit in our life. But she was awesome. And she had an upstairs neighbor, Debbie, who every time we went, Debbie was just gone. She wouldn't even make eye contact with us. And gradually that turned into, saying hi, sticking around a little bit longer, and then to the point where we were teaching her the lessons as well. And she ended up getting baptized as well. And she had 3 daughters that just awesome. And Debbie, we found out that she was fostered for a time by a family in the ward when she was young, the Campbells, Dennis and April Campbell, Pauline's parents. And so they instantly had that connection, and I think it was beneficial for her to have grown up in their home, and to kind of feel just the spirit, and she kind of had that in her favor, which was awesome. Let's see, what else? So I was able to go visit Michelle just before I left the mission, and she had kind of fallen back into her old ways, and I can't remember who I was with, but it broke my heart to see her in the situation that she was in, and I broke down just in front of her, and just to see how far she came, and then to see how kind of where she was at. It was super hard to see. But I mean, that life is tough. You're surrounded by friends and family who don't live the same standards, and it's a tough cycle to get away from. And also Debbie, they had a friend who came over one night, and the friend was dressed to party, I think on a Friday night, and was a little startled to see us there. But Michelle and Debbie were like not embarrassed to have these missionaries in their house, and that friend started asking like legit questions, and then I busted out a Plan of Salvation booklet, and I remember Debbie said, "Listen to them because this is true." And it was just such a cool experience to be in an area for so long, to see the progression that they had. And yeah, member missionary work was off and running at that point. We basically treated members like investigators, where we came up with a teaching plan where we would teach them the lessons and extend them invitations, and just strengthen the member missionary zeal in the area. And we had 2 little girls that we got invited to their birthday party. That they're 2 twins, and their parents told them that they could invite 2 people each. And so they chose to invite the 2 missionaries that were serving in the Lift Ward at the time. So we went and had a tea party with Rosie and Katie, I think. And it was Elder McLean and Goodwin who were serving in Lift at the time. And we had a lot of good fun with them. And at the time, especially over Christmas, I remember President Fredrick told us to be in the homes of members, to build that trust with them. And so that's exactly what we did. Probably a little too much. But so the Keos, the Veals, I mentioned Mark. I think he might have been in the stake presidency at the time, or maybe shortly after, but he was a cop, and just like such a stud, such a good dude. And his wife Angela, and they have four daughters. And then Blair and Mark Anderson. Did either of you get to know Blair and Mark?
Yep, I know Blair.
Yeah,
Blair pretty well. He married one of the gals, one of the young women from,
Joanne.
I guess the YSAs from Aberdeen. So yes, I know Blair.
Yeah. He's the bishop, I think, right now in the Lift Ward.
Oh, cool.
But he was the ward mission leader at the time. And I remember, probably shouldn't tell a story, but so we were on a teach. I think him and Mark were with us, I remember. And about halfway through, I think Mark noticed it. And Blair was sitting with his legs open, and he had just a massive hole in his jeans, in his crotch. And to go along with that, he had a hole garments in the same spot.
Jeez Louise.
So after the teach, I think Mark told Blair what was up, and I don't think that investigator progressed very far after that peep show. But yeah, no, those 2 were awesome. They're both married. I think Mark's got a ton of kids. But I think he married someone from Sweden. That sound right?
I don't know.
Maybe.
That's a good question.
Yeah. And then President Watson, and you know him much better than I do. I'm certain of it, but he was awesome. I learned so much from his leadership. I remember at the end of 2006, he wanted missionaries to do away with chapping in Dundee in 2007, the following year, and he wanted missionaries to be fully reliant on members and their friends, and he had the same vision as President Fredrick. And I remember during a stake priesthood training, he challenged all of the Melchizedek priesthood holders to bless the patriarch of the homes that they were assigned to home teach, and give them a specific blessing to have missionary opportunities. And so that was, and he's a mission president in where at, like the Netherlands, or
I think it's actually in Holland.
Okay.
If I remember correctly.
I'm sure he's doing great things out there. But yeah, I loved President Watson, his leadership. And then, so President Fredrick talked with me a couple times before moves, I think towards the end of that 6 months with Borders, and he wanted to find a way to keep me in the Lift Ward because things were going really, really well. And So a few days before moves, he called and he said that Borders was going to stay in the ward, switch companionships, and take over as the district leader, and that I was going to have a awesome new young missionary come and serve with me. I think he even said one of the best young missionaries in the mission. And he told me I'd have one more transfer in the Lift ward. And so Elder Paternoster came with me. Zack, he probably came in, I'm sure, after you left.
Yeah.
But Anthony Paternoster, that kid was a stud. And instantly we hit it off. And we had a contest to see who could get the most post in the 6 weeks that we were together. And he's from England. I can't remember what part. So he had a little bit of an edge, but I did well for about 2 weeks. And then he just obliterated me after that. And then the Keoghs lived just a few blocks away from us. And we were walking back late one night and kind of up a hill, and then around the corner was our flat. And we see these Neds just looking over the corner. And we're like, that's odd. And then all of a sudden, just a massive group of Neds come sprinting down this hill, like right towards us. And I remember there is like girls and boys, and there was this girl in high heels, and she lost a high heel, and she's just like running and down the hill right at us. And we book it to the other side of the street. And luckily they ran past us, and there was another big group of Neds on like around the corner, and they went at it. And so we just locked ourselves in our flat and just called it a night. So but yeah, that was interesting. Gotta love those Neds. But yeah, with Elder Paternoster, it's such a team effort within the companionship, and it's so people facing that it's hard to separate who you are from what you do, and it's also hard to separate who you are from how you're doing, and you got to have that cohesion within a companionship. It's you can't do missionary work well if that cohesion isn't there in the companionship. And I was fortunate to have companions where that cohesion was there, and it was easy to focus on the work and not get too distracted with the little things that spitting 88 times to bug your companion or whatever it might be. To kind of finish up in Dundee, Paternoster and I, we set a goal to teach 40 lessons 1 week. We'd been close a couple times. And I remember President Fredrick called us on Sunday to see if we were close, to see how close we were. And we hit it, I remember. And I think, I can't remember how many joint teaches we had, but within that Lift ward, there was just so many awesome members willing to help out. And I know I missed so many awesome families, the Clancys, Campbell's, Keoghs, yeah. But all good things must come to an end, right? My time in Lift was over. I think after 9 months, I was with Borders for 6 months. The ward before moves, the Sunday before moves, saying, "I'll go where you want me to go." And the next Sunday, I was back in the ward. So they couldn't get rid of me. Oh, and Bishop Roy. Did either of you know the Roys?
I can't say that I knew them, no.
Oh, okay. Anyway, yeah, he was awesome. He was a good bishop, him and his family. But anyway, moving on. I could talk about that area forever and ever. But President Fredrick, that another great missionary would come in and continue the work there, and it was Elder Colin Kilgore. who was my MTC companion, and him and Paternoster did awesome work there. They I know they had a number of baptisms that next transfers, and so it was good for him to kind of come in and with a fresh perspective and fresh spirit. So then I was moved all the way to Bingham Terrace in Dundee.
Up the road.
Way.
Oh, jeez.
So, and what's funny is that Bingham, like a month later, was under construction. They were renovating it, and so we met back in the Lift Ward, and so
it's crazy.
So that was interesting. But so I was in the zone leader area with Elder Payne, and I replaced Elder DePold. And Elder DePold, he baptized the whole teaching pool and left us with like 2 investigators. But yeah, Elder Payne was awesome. He taught me the ropes. Sorry, I got to charge my stuff here. I wasn't as prepared traveling today. Yeah, he showed me the ropes with being a zone leader, and he had a good mix of being serious, but also knowing how to relax and have fun. Zach, did you know Elder Payne?
I didn't know Elder Payne. I think he came,
No?
or he may have been in other areas of the mission while I was up north before I went home.
Okay. Yeah, he was from Canada. He was a good dude. And so we had 2 investigators that were basically on the teaching pool, and I was with him for 6 weeks, and then Elder Johnson came in, Jeremiah Johnson, and I loved serving with Jeremiah Johnson. Such a humble guy. And I remember, going back to Dundee, there was a member, Scott Campbell, who he promised me that he would take me to a soccer game. Barcelona was coming into town to play, I think, Dundee FC. And Barcelona at the time had, Thierry Henry, Ronaldinho, Messi, Iniesta. And Zach, your hoodie there, you follow the Premier League, yeah?
Oh, yeah. They had a rock star team, that Barcelona group. My goodness.
Yeah. So, and we had legit seats. But he swapped seats with some friends so we could be out kind of in the atmosphere. And I think Ronaldinho scored on a penalty kick. But that was such a cool experience to be super close to those players. And but I think he promised that with me and Elder Paternoster. And Paternoster, he was a good soccer player, and so Paternoster was kind of bummed that he didn't get in on that action. But Johnson, so Jeremiah, I remember one Sunday we didn't have anybody to show up to church, but we had a number of people that told us that they were going to come. So after priesthood, we drove around to everybody we could think of, because it was 3-hour church. I think it was priesthood, Sunday school, and then sacrament meeting, and couldn't find anybody. And finally, the last people we had time to check in on, it was these Indian guys that were living together, and they were watching the Wimbledon Championship, Federer and Nadal, and it was almost halfway through the match, and they said they'd rather stay and watch than go to church, which, I get it. So I promised them, they came to church, that Federer would win the Wimbledon Championship. And so, and so one guy's like, he's like, all right, let's do it. So he's getting ready, and the other guy's sitting there watching. And so Elder Johnson says, he gets up, and Johnson, he was probably 6'4", and he goes, just in his voice, he's like, put on your shoes, we are going to church. And this guy gets up, puts his shoes on, we go to church. They had a good time. We come back, get them back in time to watch the end, and sure enough, Federer won, and I had a sigh of relief. And then the next time we went over there, one of the guys said Federer, or we said Federer won, and one of the guys in his Indian accent said, "Yes, I come to church regularly." But they were the coolest. They were so fun to teach. And so I was with Johnson for 6 weeks. He left. By the time he left, we had 7 people committed to baptism in that area. And so Elder Payne and I went to work after the polled, just baptized everybody. And so we were able to kind of boost up that teaching pool. And then in comes Elder Paternoster again to my life. He replaced Elder Johnson. So we were reconnected in Dundee. And I had a cool experience in Perth, just to kind of wrap up my time in Dundee. Well, 2 more experiences there. There were sisters in Perth. I can't remember who they were, but did either of you spend time in Perth at all? Or
I only drove through it one time on our way to Dundee, but not enough time to say I knew it well.
So I remember the church. I think it was a pretty beautiful church, but the sisters had a baptism, a mom and a son. And as they were changing, the ward mission leader, Brother Sloan, who was also an awesome guy, he had asked me to share my testimony. And I shared from, I think, Alma 7, like 14 and 15, like what have ye against being baptized, something along those lines. And I committed pretty boldly everybody who was not a member to be baptized. And the sisters had an investigator there who I interviewed him for baptism when I was a district leader just a few months prior, and he wasn't ready at the time. But after the service, the sisters could sense that he had felt the Spirit really strong, and they committed him to be baptized in a few weeks. And he said, well, I'd do it right now if I could. And then I think it was Sister Jagger came over to Johnson and I and just explained it to us. And so we talked to the branch president who was on board, because his name was Lindsay McFadgen, I think. He'd come to church, checked all the boxes. We talked to President Fredrick, so it was getting kind of late. We drained the font and had to refill it. And I brought a backup pair of clothes for, I think, a young man baptized, did the baptism before. And I brought a spare baptismal clothes. And so that was a blessing. So I was able to baptize Lindsay that night.
Wow.
And I remember, and Elder Johnson interviewed him right before. And then after the baptism, he got up and he bore his testimony. And he said that all he needed was a witness and an invitation. And that was motivation enough to get baptized. So that was really cool.
That is cool.
And then, yeah. Let's see. The Nicholsons, kind of short family that had like 4 boys. Oh, Fisher talked about them breaking their foosball table. You remember that?
Yeah. Yes, I remember the story. I don't know them personally, but yes.
Okay, so the Nicholsons, yeah, we got to know them pretty well. Mark, 2 weeks before he left on his mission, we were playing soccer and I elbowed him in the nose. Pretty sure I broke his nose. So he left on his mission with a busted nose. I felt so bad. I felt super bad. And then so Paternoster and I, we had 10 investigators scheduled for baptism right towards the end of our time there. And then one last story there. There was an investigator at that baptism of Lindsay where I baptized him, and her name was Rhoda Mackay, and she'd been investigating the church for 2 to 3 years, and I can't remember who I went with to meet with her. I think Perth might have turned into an elder area, but I was with somebody teaching her, and she knew the church was true, but she had no desire to quit smoking. And the lesson was going really, really well, and the Spirit was really strong. And this was probably the most bold I've probably ever been in my life. I basically commanded her in the name of Jesus Christ to stop smoking. And I promised if she exercised faith to get baptized, that she would no longer have a desire to be baptized. And I remember, yeah. Sorry, it's been a long day. No longer have a desire to smoke. Yeah, thanks for catching that. And I remember a couple days later, the missionaries they're called and said that she smoked. She tried to smoke, but she threw up because it was such a disgusting taste in her mouth. She no longer had a desire to smoke within days. But it was still a struggle because she had an urge to smoke, but every time she tried, she would throw up. It was amazing.
That same sort of promise was made to my great grandfather when he was preparing to go to the temple and be sealed to my great grandmother. He had been smoking since he was 8 years old, and they told him, "Well, if you go to the temple, you won't ever smoke again." And that's what happened. So
really, wow,
amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think I spoke at her baptism. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And also like the power of like being in tune with the Spirit to know how to help. And for someone who's been an investigator for a couple of years, and smoking which is a big issue. I mean, that's what was keeping her away. That was really neat. And then after that, I got a call a couple weeks before transfers to go serve in the mission home with Elder Stringfellow, and it was kind of like a quad companionship because Elder Martin and O'Brien were still serving as assistants to the president, and Stringfellow he got put in I think a couple weeks before I did, and so just in an effort not to whitewash the assistants, Stringfellow was called, and I was called shortly after, and that was a whirlwind being with O'Brien and Martin and Stringfellow. And a lot has been said about Hammer Time. And I thought in Dundee we were doing Hammer Time per se, but we weren't. I remember the first that I did with Martin and O'Brien and Stringfellow. We randomly stopped by and on a companionship, and we walked in, and it was Hammer Time. Like it was like looking through stuff, and I remember it got to a point where Elder Martin he chucked a chair outside of the 2-story window outside, like in like his frustration at some of the stuff that these others had, and one of the others was like crying, and I was like, what is happening? Like like the assistants didn't do this to me when I was a young missionary. I remember getting in the car after. I was sitting in the back with O'Brien, and he's like, Elder Hess, you need to jump in there next time. Like next time we go do that, like you need to get in on the action. And I'm just like, I don't know if I'm capable of doing that. But whatever, you know. But it was really unique to be around them and to feel of their motives, because their heart was in the right place. Execution at times, I mean, even on my end, I'm sure missionaries will get on here and say Elder Hess did this or that, but execution wasn't the best, I'm sure, at times. But it is what it was, and nobody's perfect, I guess. But in thinking of my time in the mission home, planning moves was a really neat experience. I remember the first recommendation I made to President Fredrick that he felt good about or approved. He was like, "Okay, Elder, let's do it." And in my head, I'm like thinking, "Crap! Like, I'm like, that decision is going to put this missionary somewhere and it's going to like impact them for the rest of their lives. And I was like, wait a minute, like, let's think about this, President. A fairly extensive process, and it reassured my time in other areas, because we would go through their getting to know you sheets that they would fill out, and we would wait for inspiration to come and figure out who needed to train them, and so that was a unique experience to be part of that. And I loved counseling with President Fredrick, and I remember going through my journal, and I had forgotten about this, but President Fredrick had this vision to convert other churches' congregations. It was like a vision / dream / hope that he had. And I remember he told Stringfellow and I about that, and how he wanted us to start that process of like converting the pastor, and then having the pastor convert these like starting with small congregations. And I mean, nothing ever really came of it, but it was just cool to kind of see where his mind was at. And I doubt that ever made it out to the masses of the mission. But yeah, I mean, that was my time in the Scotland Edinburgh Mission.
Very cool. And who did you give the poster to?
Oh, yes. Anthony Paternoster got it. Yep.
Legend.
Yeah, we served twice, and I mean, yeah, it was he was such a good dude. You got to have him on. You got to get him on the podcast and have him share his experiences.
Yeah, anyone that you're still connected with, I mean, obviously it's a pretty easy invitation to say, hey, I was on the podcast, listen to it, and consider being on it. Let them know, because we'd love to have them. I mean, just going through the list of the people that I wrote down that you've mentioned, we've barely scratched the surface. So there's plenty of opportunities, and we're not going away anytime soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. I would, I think I mentioned a few, but McKay Lynch, he was out in my group, and I served with him towards the end. Do you have him on the schedule?
I've reached out to him in every facet that I have, and I've not heard back from him, including finding his telephone number and calling him, and he has not responded. So if you're in touch with him, hey, McKay, come on the podcast.
I ran into him at Coldstone a number of years back, but yeah, he was another fan favorite, just such a good dude. And Colin Kilgore, get him on. I'd love to hear from him. And Joe McLean, Devin Goodwin, spent a lot of time with them in Dundee. But man, even, I mean, yeah, I know I've spent tons of time, but even just so many memories that have come back to me in the last just couple months. And so thanks so much for giving us this platform. And even, I mean, just this, it's probably been almost 2 hours, which is crazy, but just so many memories in the past couple months, which have been really helpful for me, especially right now with just the weight of life. It's been good timing.
Good.
We appreciate that. I was thumbing through while you were talking, and I found the journal entry of our day that we went on exchanges. I just have to read the end. This is awesome. This is the best part. I mean, I have everything else you've mentioned, but I wrote, Elder Hess made a nice pasta dish with tomato juice and cheese.
Power pasta.
Is that what it was?
In the Hess household. Staple in the Hess household. Yep. Power pasta.
And then I wrote, we then went to work to finish our day. We had planned to chap a street, but the bus was going to take too long, so we walked. As we walked there, the street was non-existent. So we chapped some on Duke Street and then walked back from High Street. It was a long walk, so I nearly died when bedtime arrived. There's the reason right there, probably why I was sweating through my shirt.
Oh, that's awesome. Good
Man.
memories. And I've had tons just pop into my head just doing this, and I'll have to write them down, stuff that I've forgotten about. And but that's awesome. So awesome.
Great. That's been everybody's experience. It's like a tidal wave. Like you think, oh, it's so long ago, I don't remember much, and as soon as you start talking about it and walking through it, just all starts flooding back. So,
well, and I've noticed the episodes get a little longer and longer, and I think it's because we're all remembering so much more. So I think you guys have opened the flood is coming. The memory is coming. Yeah, which is good. I'm probably gonna get back and after this and go chat my wife's ear off for the next little while and talk about. And I'm sure I missed so many members that in missionaries, but there's just not enough time to go through it all. But
there is time, because you can always come back as a guest host. If you get somebody that you want to come on with, let us know. If someone needs someone to hold their hand and they don't like big bad Zack and Jack, we'd love to have you on as a guest host in the future too. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've all discovered, I mean, Jack and I have been reflecting recently, we're nearing our 50th episode and our 50th conversation, which just sounds insane. But we never would have guessed that we'd be here at this point. But like, I would imagine, I haven't re-listened to my episode in quite a while, but I would imagine that if I redid that episode, it would easily be 2 or 3 times longer, just because there's so many memories and things that have been rekindled as we've had these conversations that, it's just one of those things where each of us has different memories of each other, and then ultimately we bring them all together, and it's just like you said, it's a proverbial tidal wave of memories. And Jack said it great. The vault has been opened, and as each of us listen, there's more thoughts and more memories and more people, and it's unbelievable. So thank you for contributing to that. We really, really appreciate you taking time after a long travel day. So Brady, don't hesitate to reach out in the future. If there's people that you come across that are bashful, please let them know that we love them and we'd love to have them. And if we can help in any way to encourage people to come on, that's honestly what we'd love to do.
Absolutely. I'll keep an eye out when you post this, and maybe see if I can tag people that I mentioned and get them on. But it's such a blessing to have this documented. Yeah, even though it just scratches the surface, like you said, but just have this documented for my kids, maybe grandkids at some point, and but just to have this saved somewhere, a platform to have it. And just a neat, and I've told other people about it, and they're like, I need to do that with my mission. And so I'm sure other missions are going to catch on and do the same thing.
Cool.
We love it. Well, Brady, it has been amazing. Thank you again for taking time and sharing everything. We love you as our brother in Scotland, and we'll let you get on with your night. So thanks again, mate. We love you, mate.
Okay. Love you guys so much. Take care.
All right. Cheerio, mate. Bye.
Bye.